And let's all of us come together in this space, in our present moment, in our now. And let's breathe together for a minute. Let's just all take in a nice collective deep breath and then a sigh out. Like, bring your awareness to the here and the now, the abundance of breath that you have available to you all around, air to breathe. We're not deficient of air, we're not devoid, we're not lacking, right? We don't have to pay for it. It's not like we are saying we can't afford the air that we're breathing. There's too many calories in this air. There's not enough health in this air. So just taking it in and knowing that whatever you're choosing to take into your body is what you're going to be putting out as well. And each breath is manifesting and creating the current now version of yourself, which is what happened before. And so when we're working and playing together, which pretty much synonymous for all of us, when we're playing together, each breath we're creating something new. In orange today, don't usually wear this color, but I am really in my sacral chakra today and thinking about creativity, sexuality, flexibility, and flow. And what are we moving ourselves towards? So with each breath that we take in, we're observing what has come before and what we've created before, perhaps unconsciously, usually unconsciously, and putting the intention into what we are moving into. And today, all of us breathing together, all of us being in our bodies, not holding judgment for what was, giving space of understanding, awareness, acknowledgement to what is right now is the past represented in our present. And what we are moving towards is by who we are becoming. Not how we are creating that, but by who we are becoming. So today, we get to spotlight on Erin. So everybody gets an opportunity to know a little bit more about who Erin is, who she is becoming, and who she was in the past with the old stories. Are you ready for this, Erin?
Full disclosure, obviously we're moving. So Grayson's art teacher is currently here, and they're taking the fridge. So if we hear loud banging, listen, this is real life, okay?
Yeah, I'm like, you all can pretty much see just about my entire living space currently. And just seconds before I got on this call, even while I was at the beginning of this call, before you hit the record button, he was yowling because David just left. And yeah, that's his emotional support cat. So yeah.
Old
Isn't
Erin,
all of,
oh, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, isn't this all just so figurative of like life? Like we always have like some little distraction coming at us in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Old Erin would have been like, be quiet, or I would have gone to a different room, or like, you know, it has to be quiet and like we have to like present it a certain way. It's like, no, here I am.
Yes.
And we didn't talk about this ahead of time. I did write down a couple of key components for like what your Chiron is, what your core wound is, what your north nodes are. And I didn't ask Brenda to prepare anything ahead of time, But like, let's just roll with it. Let's have some fun today, ladies.
I was looking at, I think we were talking about last time, like who, I have to look in save my pictures, like who did you used to be, or what beliefs, what was it that, I'm ready for questions. Who have I thought I've been? What old beliefs have I given up? I was like, ooh, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And don't you think sometimes you don't even know who you used to be and who you are until you're in those situations again?
Yes.
You know, like you're like just kind of focusing on you, Erin, right now. You're going through such a big transformation with your all's move that it's like, you're like in it. Like you are the new version of yourself. And you could even just kind of reflect and think, you know, Erin from 6 months ago, if you would have told her you're going to move your whole family to Hawaii. Right.
Erin from 6 months ago would have believed you. But do you remember when you and I were in Lindsay Dotsloff's coaching masters, and she said, wouldn't it be fun if, or wouldn't, okay, that exercise, one of the things I wrote was, wouldn't it be fun if I moved to Hawaii in 2 years instead of 5? And I was like, oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about this before, but so often we get what we want. And I'm like, we just got to start dreaming bigger.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious, can I probe? Like, are you okay?
Yeah.
So when you wrote that, wouldn't it be fun if we could move to Hawaii in 2 years? How did you feel? Like what was resonating with you? What was coming up? Like checking in, like what was your temperature there?
It was like, what if it doesn't take as long as you think? Like, what if it could happen faster than you have this idea that it has to take 5 years?
Yeah. You were believing in the possibility.
Yeah.
Were you at the could as a possibility then? And how far back would you have to go in your experience to say that could wasn't a possibility?
Good question.
Yeah, that's good. So before, I think when Jason and I got married, 10, 12, I don't know, 09, whenever that was, thinking, wanting to move there, but having it, making it have to look a certain way, right? So we've always owned our homes, right? And so the market and what the price of homes are there and things of that sort, like that'll never happen because I wasn't in the mindset of $1 million, $2 million homeowner, right? And then when we went in 2019, when I met Tanya and Kristie at the retreat, thinking, well, maybe you could buy a condo. That's not $1 million. Maybe you could, I don't know, right? So there was that possibility. That's kind of when possibility started to open up in 2019. And then when we went back in 2021 in May, with the purpose of like, let's stay here for a month and let's really see, like not a week, but like, let's immerse ourselves and let's go drive the island and let's really see if this is what we want to do. And then deciding like, yeah, like this is what we want, allowing it to look up, like, do I actually want to immediately purchase a place? No, because I want to kind of rent, you know, and then we kind of had vacillated between like traveling for a while, but we have a dog, right? So that's kind of been our biggest anchor. But now after having been in Costa Rica for 2 months, that was perfect because it really showed us as a family that Jason and Grayson really want a home base. And so then allowing, okay, it gets to look like however we want it. Like we could rent for 6 months, we could see what we want, and not being so attached. I think when we got married and in 2019, it was like, okay, I need to know how it's going to happen. And then over this past year, it's like, who's the girl that lives in Maui? How does she show up every day? Who is she? And then letting it take form however it looks and not being attached to it having to look a certain way. Because if I was attached to a homeowner, I wouldn't be going right now, you know?
Right.
And so, yeah, I think possibility probably started in 2019. Like, we don't have to purchase immediately. And also feeling freedom in that too, you know, like this is the first time Jason's never not owned a home. He never lived in an apartment. He never did any of those things. Yeah. And so even though he'll still, you know, help in repairs or whatever, he's like, it kind of feels a little freeing that like, if we wanted to move somewhere after 6 months, we could, like, we don't have to worry about selling or, so having that freedom, I think, in a way that maybe before I wouldn't have thought of it like that. Freedom looked like that.
Yeah. I'm curious if there was a story or a belief around the attachment to buying the house that was rooted to money.
1000%, because you use your money and you make your money, you know, property taxes write off, and if you're going to, you know, use money or spend money on a house, you don't want to be throwing it away in rent. So all of that old programming, financial planning programming, right? And, you know, obviously we get to decide what we think about every decision we make, you know, like, would never think that this is throwing away my money, you know, that I'm paying rent, you know, but years before, for sure, like, that was definitely ingrained, probably through parental and also through financial planning, like tax write-offs and interest, and all equated with money, or related, I should say, with money.
Well, and I think that just appreciating where you come from with your like education and your background knowledge of your job. Was it a financial planner or what, you know, and you can put the label on it, but knowing that space and where you are now, it's like polar opposite, right?
Well, also letting go of like, how do we use the money we've invested? Because that was supposed to be for retirement, and retirement doesn't happen until after 50 or 65. I mean, I remember, talk about, Jason was still at BMW. So that had to have been before 2015. And I remember asking our financial planner, like, because the goal was to retire at 50. We were on track for. And I remember thinking, like, I said something like, do I have to continue to work for my dad? Can I just not? And can we get there with just Jason? And he was like, yeah, you can. But thinking like, but we got to muster through till 50. And I probably was 35, you know? So like, we got to suck it up for 15 more years. And then we can do what we want to do. Versus now thinking like, what if this amount of money that we have is for this very moment? And then we get to decide. And here we go back to financial planning, right? Like, when you retire, you're never going to make another. You're never going to receive, or you're never going to generate any more money after that, right? We have to like protect it. We have to like make sure we get to like 90 or however old we're planning for your death.
Your value just dissipates and just, you know, disintegrates into the ethers.
Yeah. So getting to the place, I mean, so much, right? Like thinking that I could leave my dad's company, that was like step one. And then I could use my actual investments, you know, and then, so just like a little at a time, but yeah, so much ingrained, not just parentally, but I think financially from my background of like, you do not touch this money. Cause you know, when you take out 401k, you pay taxes and penalties, and that is an absolute no. And teaching myself like over this past year, like I'm way more important than money, you know?
As are the experiences you've had.
Yeah. You know, and there's been plenty of times where I've asked Jason, like, would you rather have the money or would you? And he's always like such a beautiful example. Like he's my yin to the yang, right? Like he's like always the experience, right? But this idea that like, what are we saving the money for? And I'm not saying go willy-nilly and just blow it all, right? But like, why are we accumulating so much money for what? To then be able to leave our jobs or sell our businesses and then get to do what we want to do? Because I also grew up with a belief of you make your money and then you have fun. But I think Tanya grew up with you have fun and money is a byproduct of that.
Actually, it was a little bit more of my mom was like, you work first, you save up your money, and then you
Okay.
play later. But she always told me, do what you love and the money will follow. So there was there's a little bit of both of those. Like I always had to do my chores before I could go have fun. I always had to clean my room before I got to go out for the weekend. And I didn't want to clean my room then.
Yeah.
And then I became an obsessive clean freak because I had to have some sort of order. But yeah, no, it was a conflicted message with money. And it was always very much from the lack perspective. Like we don't have enough. We need to save. We need to be really smart with our money. And deceitful. Like do whatever we have to at all costs to preserve money.
Yeah, it's definitely like you tolerate things you don't want to for money, for sure. That message is was clear, passed down, you know.
I mean, it's just what you do, right? Like I feel like I even still hear this like so clearly in my head. It's just what you do. And it's like, even just taking these little stories that we hear that, you know, it's our generations or our parents or our society, and we go, really? Like, do we have to?
Yeah.
And I think that your story is going to show how much you have unpacked and untangled of like, it doesn't have to be like this.
And it doesn't mean that this has not been without plenty of tears and full on body rashes and crying and texting you girls and like, you know, I think it's easy when you see people doing it, like, oh, it's easy for them or they did it. It's not possible for me. And I for sure have felt that before too. And I think it's really important to share this part of it, right? Like, it wasn't like I woke up. I mean, I remember before the whole travel YouTube thing was a thing, when it was just getting started in 2016, there were several families that all got started kind of at the same time, different, some RV, some sailing, some just land travel. And I remember thinking like, God, it's so, they just got up and did it. Like, oh, they had this idea and within a couple of months they made it happen. But I don't think that many of them have really talked about like, no, it was probably a year plus in the making. And I know a lot of them probably have not talked about the emotional side of it, of the deconstructing of, you know, the beliefs and what we have to actually tear down in order to be this person, you know,
to create the space in order to bring something new in. There's a process of needing, some of us, it's more of a physical, some of it's more the, like perhaps the mental chatters. Some of it might be like beyond explaining with words, but there's this process that we basically have to destroy or kill that old part of us, that old belief system, which is usually ingrained in the bodies. Like our bodies are our records of the past. This is our storehouse that keeps all of our subconscious, our childhood. It's wired in here. And so when we want to make a great change like this, we literally have to deconstruct, decommission, destroy these old beliefs and identities of who we are. And there's numerous archetypes, right? We have our parents, their parents, we have our community, our society, our religions that we perhaps belong to. All of that has to systematically almost be deconstructed, and it doesn't happen in a linear process. And then we have to allow for the space. And I think the space is probably one of the hardest parts of it,
Mhm.
right? The silence, the slowing down, the space in order to let the dust settle after we've ripped out all the old stuff and allow something new to come in. So what would you say has been one of the themes, like we've talked before, us together as individuals, about life as a spiral, like we just keep going through these same cycles and level up, level up, level up. What would you say has been your consistent theme in life for that thing that you have to keep going back
Working
to?
towards, yeah.
Yep.
Before you say that, I want to say, you know, people will say, oh, you need to experience it, you're not going to die, but you are actually. There is a part of you that is going to die, in terms of that person doesn't
Death
exist.
required.
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. And I think that that's really important, that people know that. It's like, oh, you can feel this and not die. It's like, yes, but you are birthing a new version of yourself. And in order for that to occur, absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
so of course it's money. That's my spiral staircase. I mean, it shows up every time I want to up level. And the typical thing is like, you're going to run out of money. Like that is the thing that happens, or that the chatter, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a process of showing myself every time I've done it, I haven't. And we don't know how it's going to work out. Like, I was thinking about this house and I'm like, man, this house taught me so much before I even knew about thinking about Maui. Like, we lived in another house. We had like 2 years left to pay off till it was completely paid off. I wanted to live in this neighborhood. I would drive around it, you know, for a year or two. And it was never like, I have to live in this neighborhood. It's just like, it'd be really nice to live in this neighborhood. I would peruse it, see who's selling, you know, there's not a lot of one stories in this neighborhood. So, and it's a multi-generational neighborhood. Like, a lot of people they just keep their houses in this neighborhood. But I would just go and I was like, you know, so the desire, right? Here we go back to our hearts versus our mind. The desire for me at the time was, I really want to, but on paper, this sounds so silly when I say this, but I literally was like, okay, what's the difference in mortgage? Because it would be paid off in 2 years. This would be a 30-year loan. What would we not be saving for retirement? Just all of the money stuff, right? That I like thought I had planned out, like, and on paper, it didn't make sense to do this house. Why you would be paid off, you would be free and clear, all these things. But I was like, I want to live over here. Like, I want to do it. And I remember Grayson's nanny at the time, she was like, yeah, sometimes it doesn't make sense on paper and you just still do it because you want to do it.
I love that.
And I was like, yeah. And so we did, but looking back, like, I could have never known that our rental house would have accumulated in value, that this house would have accumulated in value. Like, there is no telling how this would have all panned out. And so it really kind of, I was pondering about it the other day, like, gosh, whenever I have followed my heart, it has never led me astray. Never. And kind of just bringing it back to that, because also I think too, it's like we start with baby steps. Like, this might've been a big step for me at the time, right? But like, now moving across to the Pacific Ocean and like really using funds, and so it's like it gets bigger and bigger, right? But the story is still there, and just, yeah, like, you have no idea how it will work out, but continuing to do what you want to do from a place, not because, oh, this will make me feel better, but from a deep desire, soul desire, right? Like, you know, I told my dad, he said something and I was like, easy is staying here. Like we can stay here. This is easy. It's good, you know, like, but
Fine.
yeah, it's fine. I mean, like to some people, this is a really great life. But like what Tanya has said in different forms, but like we have to let go of good in order to have exceptional and great, which is so, you know, my dad has always said, don't pass up good looking for perfect. And I take that more as like, hey, don't risk too much. Don't do the thing. Like if you got it good, like be happy with good versus now it's like, but in order to have like great, we have to let go of good, which is really scary for like, there's no reason why you should sell, Erin. There's no reason why you could just stay here but the soul, when the soul wants something, it's like, you can only contain it for so long. I think, I don't know, you know,
When you're
that
saying
nagging.
that, like, don't pass up good looking for perfect, it makes me think up here, right? Like we're in judgment, we're in analysis and like weighing out the pros and cons.
Yes.
And just like what you were talking about with writing out all the details of the houses, and you're like, but right here says this house. And I love that you had someone in your corner saying, sometimes it doesn't, like what the numbers or whatever, right? Like sometimes it doesn't make sense on paper. Like you have to follow your heart. And I'm curious about the support that you've had versus the not anti-support, right? But like the people telling you, which they're probably like big players in your life, right? Like saying, are you sure? Yeah. Like how did you all handle that experience? Or how
For
are
sure, you
handling
girls,
it?
right? Like this is where we go back to like, there is not enough money in the bank that could ever buy me what I have with you girls. Nothing. And let me say it a different way. I would give up all of my money in the bank to have you girls.
Same girl.
And I remember someone talking about this one time where they call it like a baby belief. You have this belief or you have this desire and you kind of just need to like protect it a little bit, right? So there was a time when I didn't tell everyone we were going to move. A couple of things. One, because whenever I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So I have that internal dialogue. Well, if I tell everyone we're moving and we don't move, right? Tanya's laughing probably because her spouse is like that too. So there's that, right? I have that story.
If you make a commitment, if you tell people about it, you better follow through. You don't get to change your mind.
It's that. And it's also like, you just dreamed too big. Like, look at you. That was a cute little dream you had, but like, come on, you know, that whole story.
Yeah.
For the people giving you the reality talk.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
And you just don't want to hear it.
And you kind of like, you're probably 80% there, like in your belief and this is happening, but there's that 20% where you still are a little shaky. And like, I call it like protecting my energy. Like I just need to protect who I share it with. And because that's not their reality or belief or whatever we want to call it, right? That's not how they see that life through their lens. And so engaging in that kind of conversation is not beneficial to me and my desires or beliefs or, you know, so kind of protecting that. So that was number one. And just coming to kind of like, they don't have to understand it. Like I used to be like, I need to get them to understand, not just about Hawaii, but just in general, right? Like they need to understand, right? Like they don't have to, they can keep their beliefs. It's totally fine. and I can have mine too. And what am I going to focus on? You know, am I going to try to convince, or am I just going to bring it back to me and like, but this is what I want. This is what we want for our family. We're going to keep, you know, like North Star, I guess, you know, like I'm just going to keep, looking ahead. Right. And I think it brings up, you know, like my sister's boyfriend my sister came over and wanted to say goodbye or whatever. And he was like, and we're not close at all, but he's like, man, when Amy told me that, he was like, I am so excited. He said, and proud. And like, he's like, lots of people talk about doing stuff like this, but lots of them don't. And that doesn't mean anything about, you know, anyone else, but the courage to do, this goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, right? The courage to feel what you have to feel, right? In order to have what we want. You know, I think sometimes we focus on, oh, we're going to feel like this, or it's some of those air quotes, positive emotions, right? But like, I had to feel shame. I had to feel guilt. I had to feel scared and cry and all of these things that I don't think comes back to like willing, right? Like, are we willing to feel this to have what we want? And sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay. But I think it goes back to just protecting what I say in those early stages, because and some people that are really close to me are big planners. I mean, I have been a big planner all my life. It was like a coping mechanism actually for me, you know, like if we paid for Grayson's college and I saved X amount, and, you know, like that made me feel an illusion, right? Safe. So when people are like, well, what's the game plan? And you're like, don't have one, you know?
The planner, I'm like, the planner in me gets a little triggered. I'm like, you mean, oh, okay.
I mean, I have a plan, like this is for the next 6 months. Well, what about the next 6 months? And like, I don't have a plan. Like, we're just doing this for 6 months, and allowing everybody to have whatever experience they have from that, right? Because I think sometimes that's scary to some people. And so they're like, well, what about this? And what about this? And I know I have been triggered in the past, because I'm like, well, but how, here we go back to the how. Like, I don't know what's going to come from doing this. And I don't know if you or Tanya said, but it's like when people say it doesn't make sense, it's like, we're not using our senses, you know? Right. It's like, we are.
When they say that, it's logic. They're looking at logic. It's not logical sense. It's not an emotional sense.
Yeah. Yes.
It's reaching out. It's past the third dimension. It's reaching out into the fifth dimension, where all possibility exists, and there is no sense. There is no actual logic. Like, there's chaos and there's order and there's possibility, but we don't get to, like, it's all out there simultaneously. Chaos, order, possibility, dark, light. It's all there, right? I chatted Brenda your Chiron, which is that's usually Chiron's about like our kind of like our life's work. I know in Gene Keys, your life's work number is different than that. It's like that wound. It's the devil that always keeps coming.
What is it? Please tell me. I want to know.
It's number 2. In Gene Keys, that's all about the way of orientation with a shadow of dislocation, a gift of orientation, and a siddhi of unity. And the dilemma is agenda. So we were just talking about the whole planning. I'm reading from this book, by the way, The 64 Ways with Richard Rood. I also have the other book, but this one's a little more poetic, which I love. it's all talking about, as soon as we left the Garden of Eden, our unfallen state as a single, undivided consciousness, the treasures began arriving. Such is the compassionate nature of the universe that no consciousness can forget what it is for long. Humanity has always received the echoes of truth, the truth of our true nature. There's a whole bunch more. Obviously, I'm not going to read it right now. But I tickled her with that. Also with your core wound, that's 59. Which has a shadow of dishonesty, a gift of intimacy, a city of transparency. And when we're talking about shadows, gifts, and cities, we're talking shadow is that those dark aspects of ourselves, the things that we want to just stuff in the drawer or in the cabinets and push them all the way to the back. The gifts are when we reach into those drawers and we pull that out and we turn it into treasure. There's always a gift that comes from some of our darkest moments, some of our most shameful past, our guilt, our anger. And then the siddhi is the sort of like when the ego's removed and all the goodness is coming down unfiltered with any kind of shadow. It comes down to meet the gift. So the shadow rises up to become the gift, and the siddhi comes down to meet the gift. In your north node, so you had just mentioned North Star is 4, and you have both the lines line 6 and 2 within that 4. And for some people right now, they're like, what are you guys talking about? Well, Who University is going to start diving into some more of these things. But just know that this is part of some of the things that we contemplate. There's some of the tools that we use in contemplation of who we are becoming, exploring our shadows, exploring the anger, the shame, the sadness, the guilt, the beliefs about who we are. And so with that long lead up, one of the questions that I have for you, Erin, has been, what have been some of your greatest resources to dig into those shadows, to bring those gifts to light? And then I also want to invite Brenda, if she has anything she wants to throw in there about either the 2, the 59, or the 4 that seems relevant, like either before or after you answer that question.
I'll let you go, Erin, first.
Okay. Some of the resources to work through, well, obviously you girls, here we go back again, right? Like having
what is it about our group? Because some people don't get to see the inner workings of what's currently happening here that eventually we want to bring to the world, right? But we've been in our nice little cocoon, our bubble here. What is it about this space?
Well, it's safe, right? So to be able to share, back to Kristie's question, right? Like when you're doing things you haven't done before, for me, it feels very vulnerable. It feels very raw. I want to protect, who do I share that with? And it be met with love and compassion and safety, not, it can't work, it's not going to work, what's wrong with you, like all of those things, right? So I think I think of unconditional love, right? Like of just showing up and getting to just be, whether it's the great day and you're on this side, or like the slobbering, like, it's not coming out of my nose, and I'm just sitting, we use Marco Polo for people that don't know, right? So we have these coffee chats, but then there is a thread that all 4 of us, or our 5, Erica too, are on, that we can hop on at any time. And whether it just be getting our voice out or someone being able to respond back, like the gold that's there, and able to be supportive and just hold that space for whatever it is that we're going through. I think that when whatever we're doing, whatever it looks like, right? It's not to say people need to move and uproot their family, but whatever you're up leveling with, being able to be surrounded and supported by people to allow that to occur naturally for you, I think is everything, because the mind is tough enough on you with all of the loveliness that it likes to banter, you know? And so having that little, like, come get under my wing, and like, you know, even though we're all in different states, but like energetically, like holding each other and so much love and space for everybody, I think is the biggest thing. I think really allowing, you know, I was thinking about like, what are the emotions that I've experienced, or anger, you know, is a big one that I've had to really work through. I repressed a lot of anger. So that when I think about, okay, where am I now? And where was I a year or two ago? I've felt a lot of anger. And I don't think, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, what would you need to feel in order to get where you need to go? I don't think I would have put anger on the map.
No.
But it's been imperative. Is that the word I want to use? I don't know. And like courage, and not like courage, like I'm going to go do this thing, but like courage to feel when, you know, your entire underarms are just breaking out of like, almost like eczema. I wouldn't call it hives, but courage to feel not just those sensations like in your skin, but like in your body, courage to feel the feelings we need to have, right? Like anger, I was taught was kind of like not allowed, right? So that was a scary emotion for me to learn how to experience, because I had stuffed it down for so long and I didn't realize, I mean, I was probably, you could name me as a frustrated person, but that was just like my lid of like, here's frustration and then here's my anger, you know, like so much, right? But the frustration doesn't exist much anymore, because the anger has, it's not to say I don't get angry, right? But like the things that used to really tip me off don't like they do anymore, like they do because, or they used to, because of feeling so much anger. And I think allowing, like, I don't think we talk about allowing as much. Like sometimes we think we've got to like, I think with coaching, mindset work, whatever you want to call it, self-help, we're like, how do we want to feel? Which we do want to focus on where we're going and how we want to feel, but we also need to feel what needs to be felt, right? Allowing anger, allowing shame, allowing guilt. Like I realized some of the guilt came from using my money is because you're not supposed to use your money on things like that. You're supposed to use it on mortgages and schools and you know, so when I started using my money for things I wanted to do, I felt a lot of shame and guilt, because almost kind of like, you know, parents going to get upset with you kind of thing, right? So the allowing of whatever feeling is there, it's welcome, but it's also difficult to feel sometimes, right? And and the courage, because it's like, it's easy to retreat, to go back to how we have been. Like it takes
A lot less effort, right?
Yeah, there's the word, effort, right? Like when I was talking about the house, right? It's just easy to be here. Like, you know, when Jason right now currently is like, this is a lot of work. This is a lot of work. This is a lot of work. Like, it's very easy for me to be like, yeah, it is. Like, not that I would, but like, do you just want to stay here? Like, that's easy, you know, but it's kind of like that, what Tanya was talking about, like that space in between. Like I've heard someone talk about like river of misery, and I don't want to deem it like that, right? But that space in between where you are and where you want to go, that can be pressure. That can feel pressurized, I guess, is maybe a good word to use for like, whew, we can just go back. Like, you know, we don't have to let's just turn it around right now. So yeah, allowing for a lot of those, if you want to call them emotions that aren't on the higher vibration scale.
I have something that's resonating in my brain, and I'm going to ask Tanya to repeat something because I don't know the language. The Sadi, the one was
Gift.
dishonesty.
The shadow.
The shadow was
the gift.
dishonesty. The gift was
Intimacy.
intimacy.
And the Sadi is transparency.
Transparency. And what I think about, it's probably because this is my first impression of Erin, was her, and Erin, you just kind of correct me if I'm wrong, you having a desire for connection with women, but not feeling like it was safe.
Very much so.
So curious if like you being honest with your desire to have relationships with women allowed you to kind of open up and get to the space of intimacy.
Yes. And here goes back to like being willing, right? Like I was apprehensive because my past, right? I had a story of what it would be like, but I wanted the relationships more than where I currently was, right? So I was willing to expose myself, right? For the payoff isn't the right, but that's what's coming to me, right? Like for what I wanted, right? For the gift of what I wanted. Now my brain wants to be like, but these women they do work on themselves and they,
But to think about you being honest with your desire opened up our attractiveness, right?
Yeah.
Like at no point did you message me and say, hey, I'm looking for friendships that are genuine and, like willing to help me up level my life. Like we literally met as strangers.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, it's essentially all of us did.
Mm-hmm.
Really. So to me, it's like the who you had to become, the story that you had to unfold allowed the how to take place.
Yes.
Right. And I feel like that's also happening with your move.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
like such vulnerability here.
Such vulnerability and like, let's just say uncomfortable. Like I remember riding around with you and Brittany in the car and I'm like, I don't fit in here. These girls are just so different than me. I remember crying at the retreat, being like, I'm the only one crying. I'm so oddball out,
Mm-hmm.
And when you said that, I was just like, oh, the uncomfortable, like just, this is our front seat passenger, like uncomfortable. Come on, let's go. Right. Like wherever we're going, wherever we want to go, uncomfortable is coming with us. Right.
It's almost like that's your sign that you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Right. Like if it's comfortable, well, and that I guess that's everybody's own North Compass to kind of figure that out. But in your experience right now, like that discomfort is not a sign that you shouldn't do it.
Right. Yeah.
That's really cool.
So speaking of discomfort, I
speaking of shitting in myself all the time, is that what we mean when we say discomfort? Because we need to talk about that too.
Clarity.
Oh my goodness. So I pushed Brenda a little bit here just now, kind of outside her comfort zone. She likes to be prepared, but I was just like, I would love to see like if one of these struck a chord with Brenda, to sort of like show back to you and see how that see how those correlate. Yeah, see how they reflect, see how they correlate. And so I'm super curious, Brenda, what struck you? Because I know something did.
Several things. So I study the human design side of the world intensely, where Tanya covers both. in human design, the Chiron, I'm going through the order in which she went through them. The Chiron is the wounded healer. It's where we can feel like we're not good enough, but it's also where we have a huge potential for growth. And that gate is the gate of receptivity, and you have it as a 2-6. And the line with the 2-6 is a line that you've had since birth. So there's two choices. It's either something you've had that's been ingrained in you since birth, or it's something that develops over the lifetime. And the 2-6 says creativity is its own resource, and the artist is the medium. And thinking about that in regards to your money story that's where you've had, this is where it's reflecting for me. It's where you've had the biggest potential for growth, because you've had that ingrained in you, and realizing that money is creativity for you. It's not the doing. It's not the story we've all had about doing for money. Then I looked at your North Node.
It's who you are. Like you are money.
Yeah. Which is totally what I have been not taught, right?
Right.
Right.
We're
not
taught the
we're
opposite.
money. Right. Yeah.
You're the opposite. Like you're the creativity and money is the medium. Right. And it's not, it's the exact opposite of that. Looked at your North Node, which is the gate of mental solutions. In human design, it's your life's purpose, as Tanya said. This is one that's over a lifetime for you. It's a developing story. It's not the one that's ingrained since birth. It's a 4-2, and it's recognizing everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. And you can take that not even to say strengths and weaknesses for you, where you've said, even just today, beliefs. It's recognizing that they're able to have their beliefs, which are their strengths and or their weaknesses, and you can have your own, and that they don't have to conflict, or they might intersect, they might not. It's what works out for you. And then looking at where Tanya called out your core wound as far as gene keys is concerned, that's your Mars in your human design chart. And this is another one that's over the course of the lifetime. It's the 59-6. The gate is called intimacy. And this one really hits me because it's what you were just talking about with us, right? It's being discerning, being particular in your intimacies. And that you sense over time how, what, when, and who suits you in your intimate world. And that's also an over a lifetime thing. And that, you know, as we go through stages of our life, those things are different for us, right? I mean, thinking about when we're in the corporate world, it's a different level of intimacy, but we have intimacy with coworkers. And you even in that world determine who's right for you, who's not right for you, right? And that's just, it's over time. And then as you mature and you get relationships outside of those things, some people were very lucky to have those relationships built into their childhood, you know, those intimate relationships built into childhoods. And I personally did not. So I don't know how I could relate to that, but developing them in the here and now is pretty freaking fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, you girls know all of that, right? From when we thought that we were going to maybe have some different partnerships for who you know, and like that has, when you say that, it's like, of course, right? Like everybody in my life, like, and I think Kristie's talked about this before, like Kristie opens up and wants to know everything about everyone, right? Like, and I'm like a little guarded, but I'm getting better, right? But I'm a little guarded, but like once you're in, or once I'm in, like not stalking, like, but like, you're my person, you know, like I'm going to do anything for you. Like you can call me wherever, whenever, and like not a question. And having, it's funny you say that, because I used to tell my sister, because she wanted a bunch of friends, and I'm like, I probably have maybe 5, you know, and those are, some men were on there too. And I'm like, but those people, like, no matter what, ride or dies, right? Like,
back.
And so of course, right? Like whether it be friendships or spouse or business or whatever, right? Like that, the intimacy is for sure. Yeah.
Well, and I
it's
think the other part of it is learning to trust yourself in that versus as you're growing up and conditioned about who, the shoulds.
Yep.
You should be
Yes.
connected to these people. These are the right people for you, as being impressed upon you, as opposed to feeling that for yourself. And I think we all have, maybe even still today, people in our worlds that are in our worlds because something in us says we should have them in our worlds, whether or not they're even healthy for us.
Yeah.
And that's just discernment over the lifetime.
Yeah. Talk about conditioning, right? Like, I mean, my mom has always wanted me and my brother and my sister to be so close. And that has always been like, wanting us to do Thanksgivings and Christmases, which is so ironic because she's not close with her family.
Like,
You want what you don't
right?
have.
Right.
And
You always want for your kids what you don't have for yourself. Mhm.
yeah. And noticing, and I love my brother and my sister. Like if they wanted something or needed something, I would for sure, but like, we don't have an intimate relationship, but, and letting that be okay. Right. Like what you say, Brenda, like with the forcing or the shoulding, right? Like, no, it's okay that I don't feel that way. And I'm completely intimate and close with other people and would spend holidays with other people. And that's okay.
And you actually did, didn't you?
I
Wasn't
actually
this
did.
past year like your first kind of break the mold
Yeah.
Thanksgiving?
Yeah. Talk about dishonesty. When you think about, is dishonesty part of 59 too? It is.
Oh,
Yes. So it is part of 59, gene key?
Yeah,
59?
it's the shadow.
Okay. So when you think about like dishonesty at first, when I learned about it, I was like, I'm not a dishonest person.
Right.
Like I'm like, truth is like my core. Right. But with myself, yeah, like doing things. I mean, we could say dishonest is when we want to do something and someone else doesn't, and we don't honor what we want. Right.
I'm like, how many people pleasers are in this world right now?
Yeah, my hands are back, but yeah. Yeah. So really, and so this past Thanksgiving, well, years ago, I told my mom, we currently live very close to them. I'm like, listen, we see you guys all the time. I'm not going over there for Thanksgiving. Like, we're not doing what do they call it? Placate? Is that the word I'm like? Play or niceties or not placate. Like, listen, we're not doing it just because that's what you're supposed to do. Right.
Obligatory Thanksgiving.
I'm signing off.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was years and years ago. But this Thanksgiving, Tanya was getting ready to, get out of her house. And I was like, you want me to come up there? I'll help you. And I was trying to look at flights and then that voice of like, well, you should be with your family for Thanksgiving, right? Like I should come back on Wednesday. And I'm like, why am I coming back? You know what they're going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I doing this? Right. And being honest with what I wanted and saying, no, I'm just going to stay. Right. And ended up staying, and not even doing Thanksgiving because we don't celebrate Thanksgiving. Right. But like just staying for the whole week versus coming back and thinking I should be with my family when really I wanted to hang out longer with Tanya than I did with. Yeah. So there's, the honesty with myself kind of thing.
I just have to add, so I opened this back up again to the 59th key, the shadow of dishonesty, the gift of intimacy, and the city of transparency. The dilemma that is here is trauma. And just reading this one sentence here, this shadow demands that we do some deep inner spring cleaning, and it isn't a comfortable process. The dilemma of this shadow is trauma. As we clean out our inner life and really look at our own vanity and our dishonesty in depth, we uncover layer upon layer of trauma stacked inside the cells of our bodies. Most human beings are not yet aware of the trauma they carry because they're still looking for resolution or some form of escape in their outer lives. And I know, Erin, you and I have talked about like Brenda and I, and maybe to some extent Kristie, have had more of a trauma background, like abuse, both mental and physical. And Erin, you and I have had the discussion that you didn't necessarily think that you had suffered any kind of trauma, like mom and dad are married, you know, normal kind of childhood and stuff. And so oftentimes I think you maybe discounted or
downplayed. Like I totally like on an ACE test, I scored like 2 or 3 and I'm like, what are you, right? And this is this idea of what trauma has to look like. But for me, trauma very much so has been money. I mean, it's like, what's my theme of all of my life, right? It's like, but such a gift, right? But like, yeah, like very, very traumatic. And I see it came from a place of don't get yourself in this situation, right? But as a 10-year-old little girl, like it did some work on me, right? And I didn't realize until this year when I didn't work, here we go back to space, right? I took away all those addictions of the working and the money and the saving and all of the things that I used to cope, to not feel all those traumas that I had buried deep, right? And it can be, I think we can sometimes, Kristie, you talk about this, like we beat ourselves up with a grateful stick, right? Like, I mean, outside looking in, yeah, my parents fought and they yelled and we had some financial difficulties. But someone might be like, you know what? I wasn't molested, or you know what I mean? Like you don't have that, but that's judgment, right? The body still felt it. My body still felt what it felt, experiencing. Not safe. Yeah.
And I think that's like we could have a whole conversation about this right now.
We will.
Yes, of course. The idea, I feel the same as far as like the ACEs and thinking like, oh, my life wasn't traumatic, right? Because I didn't have that big T trauma. But in exploring that a little bit more, just noticing the things that I interpreted to be insultive, right? Or insulting to me. And to know that it wasn't like having all the compassion for my parents or the people that did that to me, that they weren't doing it to be traumatic to me, right? Like it wasn't like always an intentional, it was more just like a situational thing.
It was all their own trauma.
Yeah, I was gonna say right? They carry it on because they have it within them.
Yeah. It's like thinking about how this is what excites me the most when I think about trauma. I know that's kind of a weird thing, but our awareness of this allows us to heal it and to not let it just continue to go, right? It's been one of the driving forces for me for the work that I do, like either with myself to not pass it to my daughter or to help other women or parents or whoever not have it in their life, right? Like I just think it's such a gift, like talking about the gift again, like how beautiful.
Yeah, the interruption, right? Like that's how we stop it is the awareness of it and not downplaying it. Like that goes back to the judging, right? Because if I were to say, oh, it's not a big deal, because I did for a long time, right? Like that's nothing to be like, and I got coached plenty of times, right? Like it's just, it's not, I don't want to say it's not that bad, but like you can't keep focusing on it. But when you do not work through it from your body standpoint, your mind will always continue to focus on it, and it's not to say that once you work through it, that my brain doesn't, right? It still shows up, but it's not something that's done through
the thing.
I use my head. Yeah. But
Yeah. And I'm like, just kind of reflecting with you that if your trauma was interpreted as even just suppressing your anger.
Yeah.
And like how much work you did to release that anger and find safety in that expression, and how that's led you to this growth, this transformation.
Because I mean, Gabor Mate talks about this, right? He says it's never the actual event. That's not the trauma. It's the disconnection that we have from ourselves. I mean, I learned very early on, we joke with Grayson because we've never spanked her, but she's like, Mom, why don't you just get spanked and get mad? And I'm like, Because I learned early on, if you get mad, you get spanked. So I figured out how to not do that, right? And I used suppression, and my brother and my sister just let it boil out and, you know, whatever happened. But it's that disconnection, right? It's like where we don't feel safe. So we do what we have to do to continue to keep that.
And there was your dishonesty, right? Like, here's your dishonesty this whole time. I
The
love unpacking that, because I think dishonesty for so many people looks like lying, right? Like an intentional dishonesty. And it's like, what if it's a conditioned dishonesty?
Yep. There's the movie with Drew Barrymore. I think it's called Ever After. And there's a scene where she's been kind of dressing up as beyond her station. And she does this one time to go rescue a servant that has been basically indentured for having stolen. And she's like, when she comes up to pay his penance and to rescue him from some coin that she was given, she said, how can you teach him to be a thief, condition him to be a thief, and then punish him for being the very thing that you created, kind of thing. That's not the exact line, but it's that dishonesty. It's the dishonesty of not listening to our inner knowing, because we've been conditioned away from it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to chuckle. I was like, do as I say, not as I do, is what came to mind. I'm like, how many times have we heard this in our upbringing? But I've even probably said it. I'm just meaning like, oh, it's so fascinating. And then turn around and to punish it. Yeah.
So, Erin, as we wrap this up, I have one more question for you. And if you girls also have any other questions, feel free to jump in. My question is, so you are the gift, and what is that gift that you want to share with the world? Who is the gift of Erin? If you could talk to every inner child of those around you.
I think about my life's, I think it's my life's work in my gene key. I think it's 29, and it talks about devotion. And I'm like, is that right?
I have here written, what are you devoted to?
Myself. And I think in a world, it might sound selfish, but like when we are in our like devoted to what we are soul, I should say myself, AKA my soul, right? Like what our souls want to do, how we show up, like everyone benefits by, being our number one, I know the like philanthropic, that's not the word I'm looking for, but like, what's the word I'm looking for? Where it's like, oh, I want to save the world and, help everyone. And it's like, that to me is like the byproduct of helping people by like showing up, right? Like, because how many, if you think about for Erin, I am on my journey right now because someone else decided what they wanted to do was really important. And they went and did what they wanted to do. And so they showed that in whatever way that I watched it or read about it or whatever, right? And so like the gift, I think, at least, to give to the world is like, best version doesn't feel like the words I want to say, but
Your
like
most authentic, perhaps.
There you go. Yeah.
And I want to just pipe back in about what you just said. Essentially, you just spoke not only your core wound, but the line that comes with that. The line 6, I believe you're a 59-6 in your core wound on your gene keys chart, and that 6 is philanthropic. And the thing that came to mind was that old saying about like, give a man a fish and he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime. But somebody's got to learn how to fish first. in
Mhm.
order to pass that on. So you
Yeah.
being the most authentic version of yourself is teaching yourself how to fish, or becoming the fisherman.
Becoming the fisherman. It's like the light, we talk about the lighthouse, right? Kristie's grandma like loved lighthouses. I love them. They're beautiful, like photography wise. And I'm just like, but we got to be the lighthouse, right? Like here we go back to like, I don't have to convince anybody, right? I just go do what I want to do. And people are like, hey, she did it. I want to do that, right? But being devoted to myself and my desires, and yeah, the most authentic self that I can be.
I love that.
So beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for doing
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you for following your soul.
It's fun.
It's really fun to watch and to be a part of.
It's fun and scary and a little shaky ground at times. This goes back to like trust, you know, I'm not religious, but like, this is like the jumping before your parachute takes off versus letting our parachute be out and then we're jumping off the cliff, you know, like this is trusting that like, and this is, you know, a belief like that the universe really is loving and that it always wants us to like do what we want to do, where it feels good for us. So, as always, thank
You shine
ladies.
bright, my friend.
Love you all.
I love you too.
Okay. Bye.